Hi there, TCC. Welcome to the video series for writing, reading, research, and transferable skills across the disciplines. My name is Yasmin Chahal, and I teach here in the Writing Studies program. I'm joined today by our lead tutor, Lindsay from the Writing Center. And today we're interviewing Dr. Andrew Brottlund, Department Chair of Writing Studies. So our first question for you, Andrew, is tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you teach? What is your favorite course to teach, and what is one fun fact about you? And I'll put this in the chat as well.
A little bit about myself. So I actually started out in my academic career as a community college student. And so I earned my associates at a community college, very similar to TCC down in Oregon. And so I have a real love and passion and respect for the community college system and the opportunities that it provides, and that's why I'm so happy to be a professor here now. I have a bachelor's degree in English. I've got a master's degree in English as well, and then I've got a second master's in education, and then a doctorate in education as well. So I've kind of worked on my love of words and literature, and also my love of education and the opportunities that it provides. And so in my education field, I specifically study community college systems and adult learners and how to best support them. Now, in terms of one fun thing about me, I collect umbrellas actually. And so I've got somewhere around 500 umbrellas that are in different umbrella stands around my house. And I've got umbrellas from, the Victorian period, and I've got umbrellas from all over the world. And so I've been collecting them pretty much all my life. And so I've got a lot of umbrellas. And so if you see me around campus, you'll probably see me with an umbrella, and it will probably not be the same umbrella from day to day. So that's a fun thing about me. In terms of my favorite courses to teach, I love English 101. That's the course that I probably teach the most. But I love that course because this is oftentimes students' first opportunity to engage with college level reading and writing. And I see this as so important because what we know is that English 101 can be what they call a gatekeeper course. This is a course that students sometimes don't pass, and that can really impact their educational trajectories. And so I think this is such an important course. Not just in order to pass and be able to go on to do other courses, but also this is foundational for the kinds of reading and writing and critical thinking that students will do in their future courses. And so I love teaching this course. I really want students to get excited about sharing their thoughts and putting their thoughts into writing and really engaging with different texts. And one of the things that I theme my English 101 course around is the concept of villains. I love a villain. And villains are interesting literary figures because they oftentimes are outsiders. And I know that students can sometimes feel like outsiders themselves. And so we spend a lot of time talking about the villain figure and about the role that the villain plays in narratives and what the villain can also symbolize or represent and the ways in which our society can make people feel like outsiders and why that's so problematic in different ways.
Yeah, thank you. I will say for the students that are listening, do ask Dr. Brottlund about his umbrellas. He does have a different one every single time. And when it comes to his villains class, you will enjoy that class so much. I got a chance to observe this course, and it's exactly right. And Andrew, it's the idea that students do feel like outsiders, and English 101 is that gatekeeping class. So if we can do that, give you a space to really just think, you will enjoy Dr. Brottlund's classes. All right. Our next question is, give me one second. For students taking a class in your discipline, what would you like them to know about writing, reading, research in your field? Does writing and research play a role in your teaching?
Oh, absolutely. I think that is really one of the foundational concepts that students learn in English 101 and English 102, the next class up, you know. Um, this is an important skill, not just for college, right? You of course have to be able to write and research and read critically in order to do, you know, the work in your other courses. But these are also skills that you need just in life. And one of the things that I really try and do in my courses is really connect what we're doing in the classroom to other spaces in students' lives. Yeah, they're only going to be students for a few years, right? Unless you end up like me and you just, you know, stay forever. Um, but most students, they go through and they get their degree and then they go off to be, you know, citizens of the world. And just because you're no longer in college does not mean that you are not still reading and learning and researching and writing and communicating. And I think in our present day, this is even more important because so much of our information comes from social media, it comes from television, it comes from you know, the internet, and students have to be able to take a look at what they're seeing, whether that's written or visual or otherwise, and be able to evaluate it and think critically for themselves and really be able to find information and then know what to do with that information. Um, you know, unfortunately, not all the information that we come across in our daily lives is accurate. And how do you sort through that information? Well, critical reading and being able to engage in information literacy is absolutely vital.
Thank you. All right. And our next question is, what does effective writing, research, and comprehension look like in your field?
So I think effective reading, writing, and comprehension really means being able to, first of all, access the information. And that's where the reading comes in. So one of the things that I teach in my English 101 course is the idea that we take in information and we process it, we think about it, and then we synthesize it with other information that we have found in our own thoughts. And then we then produce new thoughts from that. And so to do that effectively, the first step is being able to find the information. The next step is to really be able to understand it. And so I'll give you an example. In my English 101 course, one of the articles that I have my students read is an 18-page academic article on the Joker from the Batman, you know, universe, the comic book character. And this article focuses on the ways in which the Joker in different filmic representations is exemplifying ideas around insanity and madness and disability. And what does that say when you are pairing someone with mental illness with a character like the Joker, who's a genuinely horrible person? You know, this is someone who's a reprehensible being. What does that say about mental illness? What does that say about the role of a person with mental illness in society, that they're being portrayed in this way? And it's a very difficult article. It is based in different theoretical fields that are very hard to understand, especially if you don't have a background in them. And so we spend several weeks on this article just working to understand it, getting through the academic jargon and all of these long and complicated sentences. Because if a student doesn't understand what the article is saying, what can they then do with that? They can't engage with those thoughts if the language itself is obscuring the thought for them. And this is a skill that's very important, certainly for academia. Students are going to read difficult academic articles, but also this is a practice in patience and in engaging with unfamiliar texts and unfamiliar concepts and unfamiliar words, and that can be applied not just in college, but anywhere. And so in order to be able to effectively do something with those ideas, they have to first understand them. And once they understand them, then the effect of writing comes in with being able to take what those authors have said and apply their own thoughts and their own research and their own ideas to those thoughts and produce something new. And that is really, in my view, one of the key concepts and tasks of academia, right? Our job as academics, as scholars, is to further the thinking around a particular topic, the knowledge and thinking, and adding something new to that conversation. One of the things that I tell my students is that when you write an essay, you're not writing the end all solution to some kind of problem or closing the book on that topic. This is a topic that has been going on long before you got here, and it will continue to go on long after you leave. This is very much like going to a house party, right? And you walk in and there's a group of people having a conversation and you join that conversation and you say a few things and you listen to what other people have said and you further that thinking and then you leave and go on to the next conversation. And to me, that is effective writing, to be able to engage with what has come before, add something new to the conversation. And I think really, quite importantly, knowing the scope of what you were trying to say and engaging with it in a way that makes sense for that particular piece of writing and uh, uh, that particular thought that you're trying to make.
I really appreciate that, especially being in the same field in writing studies. It's exactly that, teaching students to, you're planting a seed in people's minds. This conversation is going to keep going, and there's going to be many gardens where this seed has been planted before. So what do you have to add? I really appreciated that. All right, our next question is from Lindsay.
Oh, yes. So this is kind of a three-part question. I'm going to read it all. What do you recommend to students that are struggling to understand writing, reading, and research in your field? Is there anything specific you want our tutors to know about your courses? And what can tutors do to empower and help students feel confident navigating your courses?
So I'll take the questions one at a time, and I'm sure there'll be some crossover. In terms of recommendations to students who are struggling to understand writing, reading, and research, one of the things that I would say is that, first of all, that is absolutely normal. That is not uncommon, and it is not something that you master once and you're done. There are different types of text, there's different types of communication. And when you encounter something new, especially in college where you're going into different fields, you're reading different types of texts, you're going to encounter this challenge or this struggle of trying to understand over and over and over again. And that is okay. I think students put so much pressure on themselves to understand a text and to understand how to complete a piece of writing, in a single day, and don't recognize the role of practice, that it can be discouraging. And that's really how I frame my courses, is this is a training ground. This is practice. English 101, English 102. These are courses that are designed to be places where you can fail. And that is okay. And you try again and you try again. And I think in terms of how to address that, it is that idea of practice. In my opinion, the students who seem to have an intuitive understanding of how to write an essay or how to write in particular ways are oftentimes students who have done a lot of reading, who have done a lot of engaging in language, and that's all practice. I'm not saying go out and read a bunch of essays. What I'm saying is read whatever it is, read fiction, read magazines, read blog posts, um, listen to NPR, listen to the news, read the newspaper, because that is all practice, because we see things modeled for us and then we can then emulate them in our own writing. Um, and I would say also to be patient with yourself. One of the stories that I tell my students is I was a upperclassman in my bachelor's degree, and I was in a 20th century literature course. Um, and I was assigned uh, um, Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf to read. And if you're not familiar, Virginia Woolf, it has this wonderful way of writing called stream of consciousness. And so when you read Mrs. Dalloway, um, it is not a clear beginning, middle, end narrative. There's different narratives that are woven together, and it's written in a way that you're really kind of seeing people's thoughts on the page. And we don't think in nice, neat, orderly, organized ways. We don't think in essay form. If we did, I'd be out of a job, right? Um, and so Wolf writes in this way, and it is very confusing. It's very difficult to get through. And the first time I read this novel, I absolutely hated it. Absolutely, I think I threw it across the room. I was so frustrated with this book. And so I said, okay, read it once. I don't understand it. I don't know what the heck is going on here. So I read it again, and it made a little more sense. And I read it again, and it made a little more sense. And by the end of it, I understood what Woolf was doing. And I understood the themes and the ideas that she was trying to convey in this novel. And I really grew to love Mrs. Dalloway. And today it's one of my favorite novels. But it did not start that way. And I think students have to be patient with themselves and recognize that reading and engaging in research and in writing, it does take practice, and that takes time. You are not going to be able to read a dense 18-page academic article in 20 minutes and say, well, that was fun, go watch Game of Thrones, right? You have to spend time with that text. You have to be able to commit yourself to understanding it and be patient with yourself. That's what learning is. Learning is not an easy process sometimes, and it is not a quick process. And so I think students need to have grace with themselves and also recognize that this takes work and it takes dedication and it takes time. In terms of the second question, is there anything specific that I would like the tutors to know about my courses? I am very interested and I highly value the idea of incorporating outside sources, engaging with new ideas. To me, writing requires a focus on developing ideas, explaining them, organizing them in a way that is clear. But, or I would say, and while grammar, spelling, mechanics, those kinds of things that what we might call lower order concerns help with that. I do not grade on grammar. If you look at my rubrics, there is nothing in my rubric that deducts points for grammatical errors or mechanical errors. If you use a semicolon, or a comma, a comma, and you make a comma splice, you will not be docked points. Because to me, language is a vehicle for conveying thought. It is messy, it is imperfect, it is eternally changing, and it varies by situation. And I think sometimes students get really focused on those lower order concerns. Is my spelling correct? Is my grammar correct? And in doing so, they forget about what we could call the higher order concerns of, am I developing my ideas? If it's an argument, am I avoiding logical fallacies? Am I incorporating outside sources in a way that is, first of all, effective and meaningful for my own ideas? And am I giving appropriate credit to make sure that I'm being an ethical writer? And so in my courses, I really emphasize developing those ideas, spending time with them, and really engaging with the development of thought. And I spend very little time as a class teaching grammar, teaching mechanics. I will work with students one-on-one when I see things that could be changed. And I instruct individually, but I do not give grammar lessons. I don't give, you know, quizzes on grammar, that kind of stuff. To me, I'm much more concerned with the development of the ideas. In terms of the third question, what can tutors do to empower and help students feel confident navigating my course? I think working with the students to understand what the directions are asking for is really key. I have been told by students that I give a lot of instruction in my directions. I give a lot of directions. My assignment pages, are sometimes 2 or even 3 pages long, because I work from a place of helping the students to, first of all, understand why they're doing what they're doing. What we know from the research is that, especially with adult learners, if you ask them to do something and they don't understand why they need to do it, they're not going to do it. They're busy. They've got things to do. Why are you giving me this work? I don't see the value in it. And so therefore, I'm not going to do it. And, I was a student myself, a college student myself for 13 years, and that is absolutely accurate. Even as a doctoral student, I'm a professor and I'm in this doctoral program. Why am I doing this? You haven't explained this to me, and so I don't see the value, and so I'm not going to put my precious time and energy into it. And so I do try and really foreground the assignment with, here's what this will do for you. Here's the benefit for you. Here's what you are learning, and here's why that matters. And then I tend to write my instructions like recipes. I see them very much as a kind of process document. Like if you were to look up a recipe for, for anything online, how to bake a cake, you're going to want clear instructions. They need to be broken down step by step, because the proof is in the product, right? If you cannot produce that cake following the directions that you have been given, it's not you, it's the directions. The directions weren't clear. The directions were not giving you the information you needed in a way that you could understand them. And so what I tell students is, if you follow the directions, you're going to get an A on that assignment, most likely. And so students have to, first of all, really understand what they're being asked to do and the order in which they're being asked to do it, because there is a logic there. I tell students there is a method to my madness. And so I think for tutors, really understanding my directions and understanding what I'm asking and being able to help students and support students in that is really important. Because for some students, the directions are really helpful and they absolutely love it. Other students are saying, this is way too much reading. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I don't know what I'm doing. And they kind of get lost in the process. And so I think, especially for those students, supporting them through understanding what it is they have to do is very important.
Yeah, I like a lot of things that you said. And one of them is that we kind of take the same point of view. We're like, what do you think that your instructor wanted you to demonstrate here? And we initially focus on those higher order concerns because if the paper doesn't say anything, nobody cares if it's mechanically perfect. If it doesn't fit the assignment guidelines and it's not substantive, people really don't care about the commas so much. So, all right, so the next question is about skills. What foundational skills would you like students to walk in with? And what do you wish you had known when you had started writing, reading, and research in your field?
So in terms of foundational skills, I I think it's interesting because coming into English 101, you have a variety of level of foundational skills. Some students come into English 101 and they already know what a thesis statement is. They know paragraph structure. They know how to cite information. And some students, they've never heard of any of that. And so it's always interesting to me coming into a new quarter and doing a bit of kind of evaluative, kind of sussing out, where people are at to see where that range is for that particular group. I don't expect students to come into my English 101 course with an understanding of thesis statements or how to cite or how to research. I do think that coming in with an understanding of paragraph structure is useful, but again, we talk about that, we learn that, we practice that. I think one of the most important foundational skills that students can come into my course with is the ability to listen to feedback, to be able to practice, and I think to be able to uh, recognize that their writing is not tied to their self-worth. I think that so often students are scared of writing courses. They come in anxious. And I get that. For me, it was the opposite. It was math, right? Terrible math anxiety as a student. And they come in because with that feeling, sometimes because they've had negative experiences in the past in writing courses, but also because I think sometimes we really tie what we produce to who we are and to our own self-worth. The students who most often do not pass my course don't pass the course because they don't turn anything in. They don't turn in enough work to pass. And that is tied directly, oftentimes, to anxiety and this fear of critique or a fear of failure. And this idea that I'm going to, just rip their paper apart and cover it in red ink and tell them that they're a terrible writer and this is no good. And first of all, I never do that, right? I do not use red ink on purpose. I really try and couch any feedback in constructive, helpful comments. And I never want a student to feel belittled or lesser when they read my feedback. But those fears are there, and they are legitimate fears that are based sometimes in previous experiences. And so I think a foundational skill, what sometimes it's called a soft skill, but I feel that's not entirely accurate, is to be open to learning. That's really my basic foundational skill that I would like to see students come in with. Be open to trying something and having it not work. Be open to receiving feedback and saying, okay, I hear the feedback. I'm going to try and implement it, because it's feedback that's intended to really help me develop these skills. It's not to demean or belittle or make someone feel bad. And separating that self-worth from the writing, I think, is really key to that. Because one of the things that I tell my students is, sometimes it can feel when you get feedback like you're holding this baby in your arms and somebody is calling your baby ugly and you're saying, don't you call my baby ugly, right? There's that defensiveness. And I get that. I've experienced that too. I've worked hard on this. What do you mean you're critiquing it? What do you mean there's something wrong with it? This is perfect. Why don't you understand that? And that defensiveness can really hinder someone from being able to develop the skills that they're trying to practice in my course. And so that to me, I think is the foundational skill for especially English 101, but this is, true for English 102. It's true for any course where you're getting feedback and you're practicing and developing your reading and your thinking and your writing skills. In terms of what I wish that I had known when I started writing, reading, and researching in my field, um, I think it I think it was largely that. I think one of the reasons why I put so much weight into that openness to engaging in the writing process is because I think as a student, that was a concern that I had. Um, what are people going to think? Am I going to appear, stupid or not good at this? This really overvaluing of what other people think to the point where it impacts how you see yourself. And it's not just true for writing. I think we do this all the time in our culture, right? What do people think of me? I have to behave in a particular way, or I have to dress in a particular way, or I have to speak in a particular way in order to feel accepted, in order to feel validated by other people. And that is, in my view, really a problem, because it allows other people to control you. And I think there is a freedom in being able to communicate in a way that you see as effective and to express yourself in a way that you want to and that is authentic to you. And that authenticity, I think, comes through in a lot of different ways in how you dress and how you speak and how you write. And I don't believe in overvaluing this kind of heavily academic, very, kind of overly formal kind of writing. I like to see students put some of themselves into their writing. I like to see them, show me who they are and their personality in their writing. And that is such a better piece of writing than one that is sterile and overly formal and trying to use a lot of academic jargon, to show off how smart you are. And I think academics are oftentimes quite guilty of that, right? Academics love to show off how smart they are. And I think that can be really performative and oftentimes it's not authentic. And so I think for me, understanding the importance of that authenticity when I was starting out in college, I think was, that I wish that I had learned that earlier.
I like that because it comes back to the idea of practice. And practice is one way you kind of try things on to see what does fit you and what, how do you express yourself in the way that you want to. So, and back to Yasmin.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is that like exactly Andrew's like explaining this idea that writing is a discovery, and I really like hearing like you have to be open to learning, open to criticism and feedback. And I can say is that's the hardest thing, students getting that feedback, and even just their fear of say the, I always say students go to the writing center, go and look, go get those different perspectives. And again, you capture it so beautifully. This idea of it's that fear that students have, this is a very scary place. And when you've not traditionally been given an opportunity to say be free on a page, or if you say it in that way, it's really hard because you're trying to fit that mask as you explained. So I really appreciated that. Yeah, thank you. All right, so our next question is, how do you learn about or ask students to reflect on prior knowledge your students bring to your course? How do you help students identify and describe the knowledge that they've learned in your course that might be relevant to other contexts, especially as they move through their academic pathways and into the workforce? So I'll put that in the chat as well.
Okay. So to answer the first question, I learn about students' prior knowledge, usually through uh, a first week pass, no pass entrance essay. And depending on the course that I'm teaching, it's shorter or it's longer, but generally I give students a prompt and I ask them to write an essay with some kind of bare bones parameters, but largely just giving them the prompt and saying, go for it. This is an opportunity for me to see what students will do when left to their own devices and without necessarily instruction. And so what I can see then is, okay, what does the length look like? What does the paragraph development look like? Is there a thesis statement? Is that focused? Is it clear? Are there any areas that I'm seeing throughout the class that maybe we need to emphasize more, focus more during that quarter? And so it's a good way for me to kind of see students' prior learning through actual practice. And in English 101, the prompts are very much asking students to reflect on themselves. So, what, would you like to get out of this course? And I stipulate, besides an A grade. In terms of learning, what do you hope to learn? What kind of skills do you want to develop? I asked them about any anticipated challenges or areas where maybe they feel like they could use some extra help. Also, are there any kinds of circumstances that might create a barrier or a challenge to their learning? And so this is also an opportunity for me to say, okay, here are these resources that the college provides that maybe could help with that. For example, transportation. I've only got one car in my household. I have to share it. Sometimes it's not available, so it might be harder for me to get to campus, using public transportation. Okay, well, did you know about, free bus passes? This is an opportunity for me to also see where I can help students beyond simply their instruction, because I think that's absolutely key for an instructor as well, is to recognize that our students are whole human beings with lives outside of our classes, right? I am not so arrogant as to think that my course is the center of their universe. And so I want to make sure that if they need some support, I can also provide that. Um, in terms of the second question, how do you help students identify and describe the knowledge they've learned in the course that might be relevant in other contexts? We actually kind of embed this throughout the course. Um, I will talk to students about what career fields they're going into and try and make connections between different concepts and those fields. Again, I don't want students to think about my courses as simply, okay, this is a course I have to pass in order to get through my program, or a course that's only going to be useful for the X many number of years that they're in college. And so if students are going into business, for example, we talked about argumentation in terms of business and in terms of marketing, and I will talk to them about how when you watch a commercial, they're making an argument. They're trying to convince you that this product is worth your money. And they're trying to persuade you to go out and buy it. When you're at the store and you see that product, all of that argumentation that's been happening as you've been sitting in front of the TV and watching the commercial, it comes into play. And so if you're going into business, you have to understand how argumentation works, because business is all about persuading people to do things that they wouldn't ordinarily do, to buy products they wouldn't normally buy, perhaps. We talk about the idea of explaining concepts, and the importance of being clear in those explanations in the workplace. If you cannot explain something that you've learned effectively to a coworker? How do you help train them? And so if you apply these concepts outside of the purely academic essay form to these other areas, they become relevant. And that I think is so important because that is going to ensure that students see the value in what they're learning. That's going to engage them. They're going to be more inclined to retain that knowledge versus kind of a temporary info dump and then, forget about it, three months later. They have to see the relevance of that. And so we really do weave that through all of our conversations that we have. And then the last thing that I have my students do in my courses is they have a 3-question pass no pass survey. I call it a survey. It's in the quiz format in Canvas. But basically, they answer the questions, they get the points. One of the questions that I ask them is to reflect on what they have learned and how are they going to apply what they have learned to the world outside of that course. And really think about what they have learned and why it is valuable. Because I will tell my students, if you finish this course, regardless of the grade, and you don't retain any of this, you've wasted 3 months of your life. There's no point. So how are you going to retain this information and use it in the future? Because that's the purpose of learning, to be able to apply this information elsewhere.
I really appreciate that. It was just as you were talking, it's the idea that you have to tell, like you earlier talked about this, telling students why we do something, and then it's the how. And it's when we give feedback as English instructors, I think we can all, as English instructors, we can agree that a lot of students don't see the point of taking a writing course. But when you say hey, like as a business student, you're going to use argument in persuasion in this way, and it really helps them bridge that gap. But I really appreciate in your answer is that showing like the idea that it's all gonna transfer over there. It's all gonna, you're gonna chameleon into that. And it's this idea that every, area writes and reads and research differently, but these skills that we're learning here do move on. They will move on. So I really appreciate that. I think the next question is from Lindsay.
Yes, this last one is about AI. Obviously, that's a big thing in writing right now. What is the role of AI in your classroom? How do you see students using AI effectively? And does your industry require that students learn to use AI tools?
So I'll start with the first question. The role of AI in my classroom. I am still very new to this concept of AI. And I have to admit that I struggle with it. I think partly because of my own philosophy around teaching and learning, I see, especially a course like English 101 and even English 102, as again, this practice space. And my concern is that if students do not know how to do some of these things themselves, not just write the essay, but brainstorm ideas, focus them down, develop them out, outline their ideas on a page. If they don't know how to do that themselves, that impacts the essay. If you have a thesis statement that has a problem, you're going to have a magnified problem in the finished product of the essay. And so the entire process really requires work and thinking and care before you can come to that final product of the essay. Writing is not just sitting down and writing an essay. I tell my students on the first day, it is a process. And the more work you put into the process, the easier it is to actually produce that final piece of writing. And so I am hesitant to encourage AI in my English courses English 101 and English 102 because I want students to have the ability to do these things themselves. Once they know how to do that, I think AI can be a wonderful tool and a shortcut, the same way that a calculator is a great shortcut in math. But if you don't know your times tables before you start using a calculator, how do you know what you have is correct? How do you know what an effective writing process looks like and an effective product, what that looks like, if you have not done that yourself? And so I am hesitant to incorporate that because I want students to have that practice. And I know that other instructors at our institution feel differently about that, and that is their prerogative. I think everybody is in a different place with this, and it is a very new piece of technology that I think we have to see what the long-term impact of that is. And I think that whenever a new piece of technology comes out and it has an impact on education, there is this kind of hand wringing that occurs. You know, this is the end of scholarship as we know it. And, you know, how dare these students use computers to type out their essays? In my day, we wrote them out longhand, you know, and it's going to be the end of scholarship. You know, and you can trace that back forever. And so I'm trying very hard not to be a curmudgeon. At the same time, I do want students to be able to practice this, especially because we don't know where this is going. And I think it is genuinely a very good thing to know how to do. I do think that, you know, in terms of generating ideas, that can be very helpful for you know, hopefully use of AI. I think in terms of suggestions, perhaps for topics, I think finding a topic is one of the hardest parts of writing an essay is to be able to come up with that initial topic and then be able to narrow that down. So if they can use AI to generate a topic and then narrow it down themselves, I think that could be very useful. But again, I think that students don't always know what a focus topic looks like and how that's dependent upon the length of the paper or the purpose of the paper, you know, all of these other factors. And so they have to learn that first. In terms of the industry, I think increasingly we're seeing in a variety of different industries, AI becoming a required tool. And whether or not I agree with the use of AI, it's here. The genie's out of the bottle, you know, and one can complain about it all they want, but there's a reality that it is here. And so I do think that at some point students do need to learn how to use it and use it effectively and use it ethically as well. You know, I think that this is something, again, that we're going to see what the impact of this is, both good and bad, both on education, but also on industry as well. And so students will have to learn how to use it.
I think it is important to understand that we ultimately will probably have to use it, but that there is something really valuable in the struggle of figuring out how to do it the first time, or even the second time, or even repeatedly, and that kind of ability stays with you.
Absolutely.
It's like exactly what you said, just that like learning to use a calculator, right? But then it's like, do you know how to do the math? And it's, I really appreciated that analogy in there. And exactly, the genie's out of the bottle and we have to, and I like how you said we have to be open to it, but at the same time, we have to put that practice and that process in. Where's the learning, right? Yeah. Our last question is anything we didn't ask that you would like us to cover? Anything you want our students to know before we end here?
So I think something that I would like students to know, specifically about English 101 and English 102, is that these are courses that do require that time, and they require that the hard work. It is hard work. Um, and it requires a little bit of kind of being able to accept that critique and that feedback, like we talked about earlier.
Mhm.
Again, I get it. Going into a writing course is scary for some students. And one of my goals is to really try and make this course as accessible and as relieving as much stress as possible. But I also see increasingly that students are so busy. They are so they have such busy, complicated lives. And that can sometimes make it challenging on another level to take a writing course, because it does require that time and that thought and kind of the mental space to be able to formulate ideas and do research and organize your thoughts. And I think if students come into the course with that understanding that, yes, this is going to take time and it's going to take work and it's going to be hard sometimes. Writing is hard. Doesn't matter if it's your first essay or your 50th. It's going to be a struggle. It's going to be, some essays, it's like a knockdown, drag out fight to get this essay written. And I think if they come into the course prepared for that and with an idea of how they're going to give the time and the space, the mental space to write, that just makes the process so much easier. And it makes the learning so much easier. And I think too, if that is a challenge, talking about that and saying, I'm having a really hard time getting this written, and really talking to your professor or talking to your peers about that, and recognizing that you're probably not the only one. I think that's very important too. We have a lot of conversations in my courses about how did the writing process go, and one of the number one challenges is simply just finding the time to do it. It's not that students can't do it, it's that they don't have the time. And so how do you make that happen? I think coming into the course thinking about that is going to make that much easier to address later on.
Mm. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Dr. Brottlund, for spending some time with us today. We've learned so much, and I know our students are going to appreciate this interview. Anything else, Lindsay, on your end?
No, thank you.
Alrighty, I'm going to stop the recording here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.